This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, Riverworld, Part 1.
I remember waking up, I was floating in water. This woman in robes flew over me and cut the bracelet from my wrist. Man, how friggin' nuts is that?
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast recording on Jordan's birthday. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. Happy birthday, Jordan.
Thank you. I mean, it's my birthday where you are. It's not my birthday where I am.
Yeah, it's your birthday where I am. So it all works out.
It's true.
I'm recording on your birthday.
That's true. Thank you very much.
You have a few hours left till you're... How old are you going to be? What is this, 47?
No, it's the difference how old I am and how old I look. I'm turning 41. I was trying to think, how old were we when we started this podcast? We're in our mid 30s.
Yeah, well, it was 5 years ago. So
36. We were 36.
Yeah, that math is pretty easy.
Well, I just couldn't remember how many years. This is 5 years. I couldn't remember.
I mean, that was speaking of 5 years ago. We are returning to Riverworld, a
That's right.
TV movie / failed pilot that we watched. I think it was our second TV movie we watched for this podcast was Riverworld from, was it 2000-something? 2005?
2003. 2003.
So we watched that, and then now jumping forward 5 years later, we are back to watch the TV movie miniseries Riverworld from 2010. So we kind of have, we're back. This is your special request by you for your birthday.
Yeah, it wasn't for my birthday, but no, I just thought it'd be interesting to come back to something, but in a different form, because this is Sci-Fi's second kick at this property, which is the Riverworld series.
Sci-Fi the Channel,
excuse me, yes. Trying to find an adaptation for Riverworld. And there was something that I thought was funny. I started listening to the podcast we had done way back when. It was our 12th episode we had done. And I listened to a few minutes and I was like, oh no, I won't get affected by this. I'll just go in fresh with the differences in these. But there was one thing that made me laugh was we had been talking about the reviews, and one person's review of the 2003 was Liverworld was the review, and then so I looked up some other reviews for this one, and I have two that I really like. You tell me which is a better review. One is called River Rubbish, and the second one I think is a little more succinct. Crap World.
This is really tickling your Mad Magazine cracked addiction.
Yes, it really is. Now I'm trying to wonder what I like better, Liverworld or Crap World. I think Liverworld is still much funnier. That's very mad comics.
I can see you reading these and just like having a little giggle to yourself.
Yeah. It was good. Anyways, I think the general consensus I should say is no one really liked the 2003 version. And no one really liked the 2010 version. Now, I will argue it may not have as much to do with what this actually is on screen as much as people who really like the books don't like that both of these are quite different than what they're used to in the books and the characters and the stories.
Well, this one was written by two DS9 writers. So
I saw that.
We have Robert Hewitt Wolf and Hans Blemmer, who I'm probably not pronouncing this right. We're two of the writers on this. The third writer, of course, was the writer of Surf 2 and The Cutting Edge 3, Randall Babbitt. So those are the pedigree we've got coming into this. Is some Deep Space Nine writers and another nice gentleman, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I think the director did something funny as well. I was looking at something. I'll look it up while you continue.
Well, yeah, that was about it. It was kind of that seems to be the big selling point was these writers who'd come up with some hot sci-fi properties.
I actually remembered it while I just said it. The director also directed your favorite of the Ninja Turtles movies, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3.
Yes, the one where they go back to medieval Japan.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if I ever actually saw that.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen the third one either. I think I stopped after 2 because, once you get the ninja rap, you're done.
Let me just tell you the tagline in the movie here. It says Ancient Japan, 1993. 1593. That makes more sense. Without a map, without a clue, without a pizza.
Oh, they don't have a pizza. I get it.
Yeah, anyway. That's not what we're talking about.
No. Well, I mean, let's start getting into this, I guess. I don't really have a lot of background on this. There wasn't a lot that I was able to dig up on it. It seems mostly just like Sci-Fi had the rights. They were sitting on them for a little while, and they were like, 5 years later, 7 years later, let's take another crack at it and see if we can crack this open as a miniseries rather than a TV series.
Yeah.
And Jordan, it was released on April 18th, 2010. I've got a couple things here for you. On April 14th, so 4 days before this, there was the volcanic eruption in Iceland that disrupted all that air travel in 2010. Do you remember that?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was just like the sky was black.
Yeah. So people couldn't get anywhere to their destinations. They were trapped at hotels, and they were just like, well, let's see what Sci-Fi's got for me tonight.
And they were like, I guess this.
And then a couple days later, April 20th, was the Deepwater Horizon explosion that resulted in the Horizon oil spill.
Oh, but that was off the west coast of North America?
Yeah. They have the Mark Wahlberg film about it.
I don't know why that's funny.
And, I mean, this is also probably important, Jordan. So it's 2010. What are you doing for your birthday in 2010?
Oh, 2010. What would I have been doing? So I was 18?
You'd be 28, Jordan.
I'd be 28. Oh, geez. Good thing I don't work with numbers for a living. When I was 28, I don't remember what I was doing. I had a 30th surprise party, but I didn't know that was coming yet. It was really a surprise 2 years previous.
Why? What happened?
No, I'm just saying I had a surprise party when I was 30, but I don't remember what happened when I was 28.
No, but what happened on the 30th? What do you mean it was such a surprise?
It was a surprise party. Someone threw me a party.
So that's it? I thought you just implied it was like far more surprising than expected.
No. Well, they always should be surprising because you don't know the party is happening. I don't know. This seems like there's a disconnect. I don't know why. It's a surprise party.
Sorry.
It's surprising.
You just set it up in such a way that I was just like, oh, what happened? Something very surprising.
Yeah, I woke up in the morning with a tattoo on my face.
Yeah, I just thought maybe like you flew somewhere and like you were at a hotel and suddenly all your best friends were there.
No, it was less than that. Anyways, it's not really a story. But the point is, I don't know what was happening at 28. Do you remember what was happening your 28th birthday? I tend to have trouble with milestones.
Well, 28 isn't a milestone, so you're pretty good there.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a good question. It's hard to think back that far, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll consult my calendars and diaries and get back to you.
Do you remember what you're doing at your 18th?
My 18th would have been 1999, so I was partying like it was 1999.
Nice. Now, as a setup to Riverworld, we're going to find out in this that people who die end up in Riverworld, but they end up a younger version of themselves. But I was confused as to not how this works, because obviously it's a science fiction concept, but how they chose what young means. Like, do you think you and I, both being over 40 now, do you think we would come back looking like this, or would we be more like our 2010 versions?
Well, we'll get into it in a second, but given the casting choices they made for the young versions of people, I would say you come back at about 35 to 42.
Yeah, agreed.
Which I thought also an odd choice for coming back as young. Like, it's not as young as you could come back, probably not at your peak.
Yeah, you would assume like 28.
Yeah, you just think before your body started to having aches and pains.
Exactly. I'm like, I'm glad to be back at 40. Oh, my back is still sore.
Anyway, let's get into it. Here's the IMDb summary for Riverworld. Welcome to Riverworld, a place of strange, watery beauty and the current abode of a fascinating cast of the recently and not so recently dead. It certainly isn't heaven, but it just might be hell.
No, I don't know if it's how it was written that was funny or your reading of it, but that was terrible.
It's a very odd summary. I also read it was like, interesting.
I mean, it kind of gives you the basic idea, but I'll say the general idea is we're going to find out people die and they come back on this planet or this universe or dimension. You're not quite sure what.
It's a river world, Jordan.
It's a river world. But what that means, we're not sure. Different people from different time periods, different cultures, different backgrounds, all sort of show up at this place.
Yeah, that's what Riverworld is. But it starts in Singapore.
Yeah, and let me just say, the one thing that's different. We won't have to talk too much about the last time we had watched this, the 2003 version. But they've chosen for the second time to not give the actual main character of these books, who is Richard Burton, who's in this, but they've decided to make him a villain. They've created a whole new character as if there wasn't probably enough characters in the book, because they're like, well, we need our new lead, and it's cool guy reporter who fights the system, Matt Ellman.
Yes, he's our war reporter. He's hanging out with his cameraman Simon Porter, and they're off to Singapore to interview a dangerous group of rebels. That's how we begin. That's how we get to know this guy. Mm-hmm. And he's played by Matt is played by the Battlestar Galactica and Dollhouse actor. I'm going to mispronounce this as I always do, but Tamo Pinkett.
Yeah, I've seen him in a few things. I think he's a fine actor. I will say this: I hate his character in this. I don't know what it's supposed to be.
They're not doing him any favors with the writing in this.
There's no question, but he's just like, he's kind of angry and kind of mean or something. I don't know. His character is, it's very hard to, I find, to engage with him.
It's not that he's angry and mean. It's that he is a saint. He's never done anything wrong. He is the perfect human being, and everyone else around him is just like in his shadow. So he's always like self-righteously correct at all times.
That's interesting. You might be right about that.
It's a hard thing for a character to be, because it's just like, I'm not saying you make him like so flawed and like he's got so much to overcome, but he's just like, it makes him so difficult to like, because he's just like better than you. He's just like right all the time.
Well, I'll say one thing, and we'll talk about it later. He does have a skeleton in his closet, Luke.
Yeah, but does he, Jordan? He doesn't seem to care at all.
Well, yeah, maybe.
Anyway, he finishes this interview with these dangerous rebels that he's gone to get, and afterward he goes to see his girlfriend, a tour group guide named Jesse, who has brought a group of retirees to a very busy nightclub in Singapore.
Well, I'll say I thought the same thing, because it's supposed to be that she's this like great tour guide, and the implication is she has met Matt at some point in his travels for work, and they're now a couple of some sort. But yes, she's brought quite older people to a place that doesn't seem like it caters to them, but they have to really put out that like they love her and they love what she's doing, and so they're having a good time. I was like, I guess she knows more than I do.
Yeah, it feels like they're her aunts and uncles, the amount they love her and the amount they care about her relationship. But you come to find out they are just people she's giving a tour of Singapore to, and has seemingly brought them to a place they would not enjoy, but they're having a great time, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And they give you a couple little snippets of their personality, because as we will find out in the next few minutes, when these people do wake up on Riverworld, they're their younger version. So you really need to be able to clock it, because they look nothing alike. So you'd be like, oh, it's Steve. He's got glasses. Yeah, he was like that before.
At any rate, Matt meets Jesse at the nightclub, and they're all excited. The retirees are all excited to see her.
Yeah.
And Matt has a plan. He's going to propose to Jesse that night in front of the retirees, I guess, which is a weird choice.
Yeah. But it's done a very weird way, right? Because so Simon comes in with champagne. Like, he's basically like, hey, Jesse, meet me on the dance floor. They start making out on the dance floor. Everyone's into it. Simon shows up with a bottle of champagne, and he's like, no, Simon, not now. And she's like, what? And then there's like a younger girl, I would say probably supposed to be a teenager.
Well, that's what's so weird is he turns around, and in the middle of the busy nightclub, they apparently have lit a street vendor into the dance floor. Like, a street vendor from the streets of Singapore has been allowed into a nightclub onto the dance floor to sell jewelry to foreigners.
And what's funny about it is that he clearly knew he was going to be proposing to her, because he's met her there specifically for that, and his friend has brought champagne to celebrate, but he didn't decide to get a ring. Did he just know that girl was going to be around, and he's like, I'll just wait till she's on the dance floor?
Yeah, it seemed like he had no intention of giving her a ring, but then when the street vendor who appeared in the middle of the dance club with rings is there, he's like, well, I gotta seize the opportunity. He walks over and buys a ring, but she's also a suicide bomber.
Yeah, and she's a suicide bomber, which we do see like kind of intercut shots earlier of her like getting prepared, like making the bomb and strapping it to herself. And what I was hoping she would say is bottoms up before she blew the bomb up.
What I thought was funny is she's a suicide bomber who I guess is posing as a jewelry vendor to get into this nightclub, but she does take the time to sell him a ring before she decides to explode.
Business is business.
At any rate, everyone at the nightclub is very violently killed.
Yeah, it explodes. They're all dead. And then you think it would be a thing where like it'd be a cutscene because you kind of know what's going to be happening. But they chose to actually show us them all dead in the rubble, which I thought was an interesting choice from the director.
It was very funny. I thought it was also funny is like Matt is literally standing next to her when she explodes. And then we cut and Matt's like the only one alive in the rubble for like 5 seconds, so he can look to like Jesse's body and be like, "Oh no, my love," and then he dies. I'm like, he would be vaporized. He would just be bits strewn across a wall.
So you wanted it to just be his eyeball? His eyeball like just kind of moves and looks towards
it's a little single tear.
That's even funnier.
At any rate, we all know because Jordan's let us know he's going to wake up on Riverworld, and he finds himself on a slab filled with water, surrounded by thousands of other people on slabs, and you know something's up.
Well, and it's interesting. I remember from the first time we watched the 2003 version, he had died in, I believe he was a pilot or an astronaut or something, right? And he had exploded, and he woke up in like a gel pod, kind of similar to like a Matrix type thing. This they've gone
an orb of some sort.
Yeah, an orb. Yeah, and this one it's more like your classic like almost abduction sort of table. Like he's on a glowing water table, naked with like a little like loincloth on.
Yeah, like borrowed from X-Files or First Wave or something.
Yes, and it is one thing that I think hurts the show a little bit, and it's not maybe a fair criticism, is that this show is very generic looking, and there seems to be very lack of creativity or care taken into things like this. Like there's nothing terribly visually interesting or evocative or different. Everything's just like, yeah, you've seen this before. It's like they're just like, it's like a paint by the numbers visually kind of science fiction show.
Yeah, the orb under the water in the last one, because what we saw was a bunch of orbs like on the bottom of a river full of people. Far more interesting to look at than this very generic, just like, it's bodies on slabs. You're like, so? Like, it really doesn't evoke much. But then a member of the Blue Man group floats in above him.
Yeah, it's a woman wearing a cloak. She's you can barely see her face, but she's blue.
She's mostly blue. When they cut to close-ups, they obviously couldn't paint the inside of her lips, so it looks like she's just been painted blue. It's not a great look.
And I will mention that you have to forgive it, but later on, she accidentally wiped some of the blue off too in one of the shots. I was like, ooh. I
was watching this just being like, I get it. Maybe in the book they're described as blue, and I'm not saying you can't make them blue, I guess, but it just was such a bad, like you could have done anything, and like it was just like, this is the choice you went with.
Yeah, it was like Star Trek the original series kind of level, like makeup sort of thing. But so she comes over, she's like hovering, floating over Matt, and we kind of get the implication that he's having memories still, or she's bringing about the memories. We kind of see a lot of clips of them as a couple, him and Jesse, and this is going to be like the crux of like his journey, or his main goal is to find Jesse. I'm going to argue I don't think anyone cares and about them as a relationship, nor do they establish anything that makes you interested in them. But the point is, it's like it's who he really loves.
Jordan, they're both generically beautiful.
I agree, but it's like they don't do anything beyond that.
That's all you need to want to get them back together. We want to see two generically beautiful people with nothing in common finally get together for no spark.
Yeah, well, exactly. So blue person's like, she's like, we have found you, and she like touches his. We find that everyone has like a restraint sort of thing, or like a bracelet on their wrist.
They have a quote grail band, Jordan, a grail band.
I'm gonna get someone who really likes the book angry at me again. And it disappears, and then
she doesn't touch it though. She has a floating crystal orb.
That's correct.
Lasers it off of him.
Yeah, and they seem to use these a lot. I'm gonna guess this is probably something from the books. They don't explain it, nor do they really need to. But there's a lot of like floating orbs that seem to make things disappear.
Well, my understanding is these blue men, they're called the caretakers, is what they're called. Is they don't appear to physically manifest in this world, so I think the orbs are there to like provide them with like a physical presence, like when they need to interact with something.
A couple quick things I want to mention. So apparently in the first book, it's a lot more sort of left to your imagination as to who these people are, and they're like barely in it. And as the books go on this series, you find more about the world, and it kind of explains it. They chose to put them in because obviously it's something people know and like. I don't know if it was a great idea or if it's even needed in this to have them kind of like come around and like Jedi spirit the sort of plot along. I don't know. Did you think they were useful?
I didn't remember them from the first movie, and I was a little confused by them. I mean, they set the stakes of the world in a very, like, Lost-esque. Like, this feels so much like 2010. It's got shades of Lost, shades of Battlestar Galactica in the casting, and then kind of how it's shot. Frustratingly annoying. Like, this period of television is so bad due to its constant need to attempt to comment on 9/11 and, like, Iraq in the most uncomfortable ways that are just so awkward and like not smartly done. And this just reeks of just like, guys, remember the Iraq War? We're talking about it here. And like, are you though? I don't think you are.
It is funny because I clocked that as well. It's like, I think it's in a couple scenes. Someone was just like, they're like, hey, what'd you die? He's like, 9/11. You're just like, oh my gosh. Like,
that's later in it, but yeah, it's not even that. It's not even like they talk to the guy. Someone points to someone coming out of the river. It's like, I know that guy from work. He died in the Twin Towers. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
They should have been, he died in 9/11. Like, in the Twin Towers, like, no, upstate.
And it's just crazy because they're just like, well, let's not talk to him again. I just wanted to point him out to let you know we remember. We don't forget 9/11.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you said that. I didn't really clock that was sort of a time period thing. It stuck out to me like a sore thumb, and I was like, but I didn't connect that's just of this period that was in TV. You know,
think about it. It's the suicide bomber who later will come up in Riverworld, and she'll apologize for everything she's done because she was misled by leaders who were lying to her, and it's all this thing where like everyone's apologizing to Matt for their like crimes against North America, and that's just like, we're the best and you should apologize. And it's just like, the fuck is happening here?
Well, there is what point we're going to get to very, very soon, because
you want to keep going?
Yeah. Well, Matt's gonna, we now cut to him after she sort of like zaps him a little bit. He cut to him, he's underwater. He sees another guy floating as well, which is interesting is though he's very confused, and I'm sure he can't even tell what is up and down. He doesn't really try to save this guy. It's just like he's confused. He sees someone else under the water. He swims to the top, and my note was he swims and he's on the shore of Vancouver.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I'm like, hey, he's in British Columbia / Riverworld.
Yeah, it's so clear. And I like that he immediately goes up, and there's like a woman just trying to start a fire. There's a couple things where because they shot on the beach, like everything seems very close. I think it's not supposed to be close, but you can see people like 10 feet away, and they're like getting food and stuff, and there's like a lady trying to like light a fire. I'm like, just walk over to those people. They're just like 50 feet away.
Well, when he meets this woman, she reveals she's Deborah, one of the exploded tour group who was there. But of course, as we've said, she's young now, so it's a bit different. And they go for a little walk, and they make their way toward this orb device that's just firing electricity into the air.
No, again, weirdly, I remembered more about the 2003 version that I remembered. In that, it was like an obelisk, right? There was this big thing that they came up to, and they weren't sure how to open it. Remember, there was like a Neanderthal man.
Yeah, I was missing the Neanderthal man this time. I was like, I kept waiting for the Neanderthal man to come out, and there was no Neanderthal man.
Agreed. And I weird again to say it is, I think the obelisk was again more interesting looking. It was sort of like alien in some way or very slick. And this is just, it looks like, I don't even know what it looks like. It's just like an old like World War II mine on top of like a platform. I just
yeah, it looks like something you see at the World Fair in 1920, and Tesla's showing you how alternating current works.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, they see this orb, and obviously they're at this place. There's a bunch of other dead people climbing out of the river, including others from this exploded tour group, like Deborah's husband, Daniel, who's another Battlestar Galactica actor.
That's right.
All the big wigs from Vancouver's acting scene are in this.
Yeah.
And then there's also Hal, who's a history professor who was blown up at the nightclub. So the old gang, people in this tour group are this old gang, and they're all getting back together.
Did we mention there's a guy from September 11th?
Yes, well, this is where they said Daniel points. I was like, hey, I know that guy from work. He died. I'm like, what is? Yeah, we're not getting back into that.
There should have been a scene where they're like, there's a man from the military. He died in Iraq fighting for our freedom, and they're like, thank you for his service.
I mean, they sent a shoulda. Like, that's what's happening. It's insane. Anyway, they're all gathering, and they, obviously they all have lots of questions. No one knows how they got there, and all the retirees, the newly young retirees, are like turning to Matt for answers. And Matt doesn't know anything either. But what he does know, because he's like, I don't know, except, quote, right now we just have to act like this is real. I was like, what do you mean? What does that mean?
He is saddled with some of the worst dialogue we've heard in quite some time, and there's a lot of stuff like that. Like, I think it's supposed to be maybe not so much cryptic, but I think it's like a man of few words, right? And he'll say things, and you go, but what? Like, and it's a lot of that stuff like that. Like, it's not how a normal human would talk. Like, he'd be like, I'm just as confused as you are. Let's just keep going, and we'll find out more stuff.
Well, it's like one of the characters was panicking, was like, maybe this is all a dream I'm having. And Matt talked him down by being like, we can't act like that right now. Let's just I know this is insane, this world, but but no one said anything. He's just like, let's just act like this is real. I'm like, why wouldn't I do that? And then that line is followed up by one of the tour group turns to him and says, it's like, sorry that Jesse's not here, Matt, but you don't have to do this. And I was like, don't have to do what? Like, he hasn't offered to do anything. Are you like? I just didn't know what they like.
Yeah.
The lines are inexplicable. People just say things that are unrelated to anything that was said previously.
I thought the same thing, and I wrote that down too. I think, and this is weird to say, I think it's like an older version of a script that's just still floating around, and they just went with it, and no one stopped and said, does this make any sense? It's like no one was looking at the monitor or paying attention while they were filming.
Yeah, I think the implication is the tour group is like, you don't have to be our tour guide anymore because Jesse's gone. That's the implication. But even that, I'm just like, if you woke up on a random world and the only people you knew were the people you exploded with 5 minutes ago, you're definitely just going to hang out with those people. Like, I don't understand.
Well, we're going to meet another character. I'm going to pronounce the character's name wrong, I think. Is it Tomo Gozen?
Yeah, Tomo Gozen, our first historical figure who pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is obviously what these books are famous for, I think, or at least the shows we've watched, is they're littered with the famous dead who they team up with to do adventures.
Yeah, and I did did some reading I was doing today. And apparently in one of the books, Jesus is in there.
Sweet.
And I was like, guys, you should have done that. Like, super helpful. You're all hungry. I mean, he's going to be he's going to be dividing those breads,
Yeah. But Tomo Gozen is, I looked into it. She's a famous Japanese warrior woman. And in this, she's that, but they don't really bring that up. They more talk about how she's a Buddhist nun from medieval Japan. And she's going to join them to fill out this very large crew of people that Matt's going to hang out with.
Yeah.
Listen, it's not my place to comment on these things. I not 100% sure about the casting of this Japanese woman. I
would
don't
agree.
think they did a great job in both casting a actual Japanese woman and the accent she's doing is British, maybe?
Yeah, it's not great. I think we could just leave it at that.
Yeah, I looked into it. It's not that she doesn't have any credibility, but she is herself not Japanese, so it was just an odd choice. And when you look at her, you're definitely not going to be like, oh, this woman's from medieval Japan for sure.
Yeah, there is also a similar sort of thing later on. We're gonna meet like some conquistadors, and they have some people that seem to be Spanish, and there's one guy who gets a couple lines, and he just sounds like he's from like New Jersey, and it made me laugh.
I took that to mean that like the conquistadors are just taking on anyone now.
I don't think so. Maybe you're right. You might be giving a little more credit. But anyways, we meet Tomo, and she comes in. I like, one of my favorite conversations is like she meets Matt, and she's like, am I dead? And he's like, who knows?
Yeah.
And they're like, anyways, and he's like, anyways, we can all speak English. And I like the way they talked around it. There was so many ways they could do it, because we're going to find out all the characters speak English in this. Obviously, it's much easier for an English audience to be not having subtitles or not having to deal with the challenges narratively of having these characters not be able to communicate, which apparently is, I think I read, was the thing in the books. Is an interesting idea, but they're like, well, the one character's like, most people speak English, so it'd make more sense that whoever put us here would just rewire us all to speak English. I was like, sorry, what was that?
Yeah, they really hand wave over that real quick, which I was also just like, do we need this explanation?
Yeah.
I thought for sure she was going to say, aren't you guys speaking Japanese right now?
I thought the exact same thing.
But then she's like, yeah, I woke up this morning. I knew how to speak English for some reason. I'm like, okie dokie.
Yeah, and I was like, but English with a possibly offensive accent, I've noticed.
Just certainly an accent that is incorrect. That's the thing. It's not that she's necessarily offensive. It's that it's just like it is all historically incorrect.
Well, I'm going to mention something else that made me laugh, and this is just something that I noted, and it's not important at all. But he introduces himself as Matt to her. Everyone calls him Matt. He's credited as Matt. She is from 800 years ago, and she only refers to him as Matthew. And I thought that was so funny because I was like, she would never have known the name Matthew. No one has referred to him as that, but they have her call him that, I think, as a way to be like, to accentuate that this
She's
like
so
formality.
old-timey.
Yeah, but it's like, it makes no sense. And it just made me laugh every time she's like, Matthew. I'm like, she wouldn't know.
What I liked is when we meet her, she's pulling seaweed out of the river, and she's putting it in a pot to cook. But a scene before this, what we've seen is Matt has gone to the Grail with one of the retirees, or the Grail, the lightning ball thing. And what they realize is Matt doesn't have that Grail band because the caretaker took it off him. But the retiree does, and when he taps it against the electricity ball, it gives him a little canister, and it's full of the food he wants to eat. Like the machine can read his mind and produce food he wants to eat, basically.
Which is meatloaf.
Meatloaf is what he wants. It's actually, there's a funny sequence too where like you see some old-timey woman, she's got her own canister, and some modern man comes to steal it from her. Like he's going to steal her food, although I was just like, why? He can get his own for free. But Matt just takes it from him and then shoves him really hard.
Yeah, well, I like he shoves him really hard because, as you're saying, he's like a white knight. And then he just points at the guy. I like that. Like off camera, the guy doesn't come back and see. He just points at him like, you be careful.
But at any rate, Matt has now discovered with this ruined retiree that like you just go to this thing, show your Grail band, it'll give you food. And then he immediately walks back and meets Tomo and the rest of the cast who are making seaweed in a pot, which I don't know where they just have a pot suddenly. They've arrived in this world and they have a pot for their stove. Whatever, that's confusing, doesn't make any sense. But Matt comes back from knowing where to get food, and he allows them to sit there and eat seaweed when he could easily tell them to walk 5 feet and get food.
Again, it was my point to earlier. The way it's shot and blocked, it's supposed to be, I think, quite a large beach, but it does seem like you could just like walk a few feet and you could go get yourself whatever your heart desires.
Even if it was yards away, Matt now knows it's available, and he does nothing to stop them from eating that seaweed.
Well, he was too blown away that they could all speak English.
Anyway, we'll keep going. Next, Matt hears some guy. He's shouting for someone named Jessica. He just hears a man yelling Jessica. And naturally, he thinks this random man searching for someone named Jessica is looking for his girlfriend, Jessie, who that's the only thing she's been called so far is Jessie. And he's just like, well, if he's saying the name Jessica, that must be my girlfriend, Jessie, he's looking for. And incredibly, he is correct.
And again, this is kind of the beginning of his drive as a character, is to find this girl. And again, it's so uninteresting. And he's so incredibly driven as well. Like you're saying, like if someone just says the name, he's like, What? It's her? I need to find her. I'm like, why?
A similar name, not even the name she goes by.
That's right. But it is. And this person is Richard Burton, obviously the explorer.
No, Jordan, no. It's Richard Burton they introduce him as, and he'll be Richard Burton for the entire show. And they do not clarify that it's Richard Burton the Explorer until the final 5 minutes of this. I was just like, why is Richard Burton the actor the villain of this? Why is two-time husband of Elizabeth
Is that
Taylor
what you thought?
the bad guy?
Oh, that's funny. No, I
They
knew it
never
was Richard
specify. They never specify, and the most famous Richard Burton is the actor. They don't specify till the final 5 minutes of the show.
Well, I mean, I'll give them this. I think it's maybe not their fault that there's been two famous Richard Burtons, but yes,
it's
I agree.
2010. Which Richard Burton is more famous?
It depends on the person, I suppose. But
He also has a British accent. What are you supposed to think?
I like how angry you are about it. I knew who it was. But he is the protagonist, the main character of the books.
Antagonist.
Antagonist. Excuse me.
Oh,
yes, you're right.
I'm sorry. In this, he's the antagonist. In the books, I see what you're saying.
Yes, he's the protagonist of the books. He's the antagonist in this. And it's interesting that 2 times, I think it's almost as if they were like, we can't have an English character be the hero. Like, it is a weird change when you're adapting a book.
I think what it is that in 2010, explorer Richard Burton, we're not quite at the period of time where we're doing a full reckoning on the concepts of colonization yet. But I wonder if they were just like, maybe this isn't the hero we need today.
Perhaps. Maybe you're right.
That said, not that Matt fulfills that role at all in any more of a better way.
I think it's just more they're like, we needed like an all-American tough guy lead. That's what I think.
I mean, you probably are correct.
Yeah. Anyways, they meet each other. Basically, Richard does not want to talk with Matt. Matt's like, hey, Jesse, do you know Jesse? And what happens is he pushes Matt down and he's like, forget about Jesse. It's not going to happen. And then just knocks him out easily. And I was like, well, that's one for Richard.
Well, and Richard also, he's bandless. He's unbound.
That's true.
He has no grail band. So they're both special and both looking for Jesse, it turns out. But yes, after Matt is immediately knocked unconscious, we get some unconscious flashbacks. And these will come up throughout the whole show. But let's talk about him now. This is what you were referring to earlier, his skeleton in his closet. Is about the time that Matt, as a war correspondent, visited a mass grave in Chechnya and then ran over a 10-year-old girl with a car.
It was weird because I don't know why those 2 things were connected. Like, I understand the story because basically what it is he's paid someone off to get this sort of scoop that there's these mass graves. Him and Simon are having the moral conversation about should they even be filming this thing because it's clearly people have been massacred. It's a horrible thing to see. He wants to film it, and then like some sort of like scuffle fighting starts happening. So he's rushing out, and while he's rushing out in his vehicle, he hits a young girl and kills her.
Yeah. And this reveals, closer to the end, they finally reveal in these flashbacks, like they keep coming up throughout the show, and close to the end of this first part, they reveal that he ran over a 10-year-old girl quite graphically. They hit her very graphically. It was very funny. But at no point do you feel like Matt has any remorse for it. They try to show a couple flashbacks where he's just like, I feel sad, and his girlfriend's like, don't worry about it. What you do is more important than the life of a 10-year-old girl.
It was weird they had to have that because they took the time to add in this flashback scene where he says, people keep telling me it's fine, but it's not fine. I've done this terrible thing. And then she's like, it's fine, man. Like, you've moved on. And she, at one point, she's like, if you don't, like, get over it, you've wasted 2 lives. And I was like, ooh, okay. I guess that's true, but, like, ugh.
To be fair, I don't think his character even feels much remorse. Like, it doesn't appear to have, seem to have any effect on him. Like, he carries no burden from it.
Yeah. So, but that's sort of like his, as we said, the skeleton in his closet. And there is this, I guess I don't know if it's quite explicitly said. Maybe you'll correct me. But there's sort of this implication that there is a second chance, sort of an atonement that you can have on this Riverworld if you've had something that you need to have fixed in some way, whether it maybe just be internal.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, that kind of comes up in the next scene, because when he wakes up from being knocked unconscious, he finds a different member of the Blue Man Group standing over him, reading his mind.
Yeah.
This caretaker is different from the female caretaker who woke him up, but he explains to Matt as he wakes up that there are going to be caretakers and those in power who are going to try to convince Matt to kill Richard Burton, and that he shouldn't kill Richard Burton even though they're going to want him to. And as soon as this caretaker finishes telling him not to kill Richard Burton, one of those floating crystals appears and lasers him till he turns invisible, and I assume dies.
Yeah, and it's a different of these cloaked person, and she's all like, hey, remember we spoke earlier? I'm a caretaker, here to watch you. That guy's bad. I know we look the same. We're both blue and we've got cloaks, but he's bad. He's a salvationist and a traitor. He wants you to protect him. I need you to fight and kill Burton because he's bad. And then she like disappears. And it sort of lets this thing of like, oh, there's people kind of pulling the strings. There's these 2 factions of, I'm going to say alien just for lack of a better term, 2 factions of this alien race that are trying to have the people have some sort of proxy war on their behalf for reasons unknown.
Let me break that down for you if you like. You're right. There are the 2 factions. There's the Salvationists, the one who just died, who wants to keep Richard Burton alive. And there are the Second Chancers. That's the female caretaker who is in charge of taking care of Matt.
Salvationist is a better name.
Yeah, the Salvationists for second chances. If you're just going by name, you know which way you're going.
Yeah.
And throughout they'll sort of later in the movie they'll explain what's happening, but I'll just do it now for us. Is essentially she explains that Riverworld was created for humans to atone, and as you've said, to get a second chance to achieve perfection. That was the purpose of Riverworld. The Salvationists, these break-off sect of their group of people, this group of aliens, believe that the plan of Riverworld has failed, and that now that Riverworld needs to be destroyed. Like, the idea of second chances wasn't possible. Now we need to just destroy Riverworld. And because of some rules that have been put in place around Riverworld, they can't intervene themselves. So now both sides have been breaking, quote, the rules and choosing champions among the humans who they remove the grail bands to mark their champions. So their champions can't eat food. I'm sure there'll be a reason. We'll find out later.
Yeah, it was a weird thing because you're right. They're like, these people are the best. They're like, oh, let's not enable them to do simple things that apparently are needed with this wristband.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Maybe that will reveal there. Maybe there's some more control that happens from the wristbands. But these champions basically are, as you've said, they're fighting a proxy war on behalf of the two sects who are fighting over the, future of Riverworld.
Yeah.
That's just the plot idea, basically.
But the one interesting thing about it, if the planet is this idea of like atonement or this second chance, I understand Matt. They've illustrated this thing. He had this little girl, and maybe it's like he needs to come to terms with that, and he needs to become a better person or save lives as sort of to make up for what he had done. But what about all these other people, like these old people who are just young now? We didn't find anything out about them. Like maybe they all have some sort of similar skeleton in their closet, but from all we see as a viewer, it's just people that happen to be around him.
It is something that's different from the original one we watched, where some people were resurrected on Riverworld, but it wasn't everyone. This Riverworld, the implication is literally everyone who's ever walked the face of the earth is gonna resurrect here. So whereas the other one felt like there were certain people selected, and in more of a mystery reason, we'll find out why they've all been brought to Riverworld. It wasn't that every human being ever has been brought to life. Whereas in this miniseries version, it definitely feels like anybody you've ever met, you're going to bump into them on Riverworld.
Yeah, and it is weird because, one, the planet would be, that beach would be way busier. And also, I think there's issues with time periods because they're going to play with it a little bit. And it was one of those things where I was like, I don't even know if you guys should mention it. Like, one of the characters is like, hey, you're here too? And he's like, yeah, I've been here for 8 years. And he's like, what? And it's one of these things where I was like, I think this timing is all messed up if everyone is here and they're appearing at different times and then they're killing each other and then they're waking up again in the water. I'm like, this is a mess.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing. And they're trying their best to explain it, but they're only making it more confusing, unfortunately. Like, they're sapping the mystery out of it, but leaving just like plot holes.
Yeah.
At any rate, we'll go back to the actual story. Matt, basically, he's going to go back. He's going to go meet up once this has all happened with the old gang to sort of figure out what to do next. This isn't important to the plot, but I really thought this scene was funny. As he goes back to meet Tomo, who's sitting around the fire, I assume eating her seaweed. And he sits down with her and he looks at her and he's just like, hey, Tomo, you're way too hot to be a nun. Some dude must have wronged you, huh? And I'm like, what is wrong with this man? What is wrong with this? Like, literally, it's just like, you're too hot to be a nun. You must have become one because of some dude wronging you. And I'm just like, I hate this guy.
But it's also written by some men, and then they were like, they have her say, you're absolutely right.
I am too hot to be a nun. You noticed. Thanks for noticing.
Thank you for your compliment. I would look nicer if I smiled.
And the same token, in the same way that Matt is just like, this is like a character choice they make for Matt. At around the same point, the suicide bomber stumbles out of the river, and Matt gets so uppity with her, which you think he would have the moral high ground in a argument with a person who exploded him. But he's so uppity with her and just so demeaning to her. And you just like, you side with the suicide bomber where she's just like, and she's like left, like her character's supposed to be like groveling on it. It's like, this isn't paradise. My religious leaders lied to me. America was right. I'm so sorry. I was just like, I hate these scenes. Like these scenes of Matt meeting these people and like basically being like, I'm the alpha male here and you all have to respect my opinion.
Well, it's on a separate note, what I liked about this scene is just before the suicide bomber woman shows up, he's explaining what he does for a living to Tomo, and he's just like trying to explain what like a reporter on TV is. And I like that to do that to someone who is from hundreds of years before you, there's so many steps you have to explain. And it's like, why even bother? And I don't think she even really asked, but he's just like, I'm like a reporter. It's on television and cameras. How do I explain it? And she's like, I get it. Don't worry. And I was like, okay, we haven't explained electricity yet, so I don't know if you'd get it, but.
Well, they do that scene again later with a different historical figure where Matt's like, I'm a war reporter. He's like, and he starts explaining what that is, and the character stops him. He's just like, I know what a reporter is. Shut up.
Anyways, this is all a bit of a time wasting because the Spanish conquistadors are showing up.
Yes, that's
who excited?
Comes out. That's who comes out of the forest, and it's led by Francisco Parizo, the Governor General of Peru and conqueror of the Incas. So we get another historical figure has entered the fray.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And everyone's freaked out. These conquistadors are all armed. They're there, I guess, probably to take them as slaves, I guess is what's happening. And don't worry, because one of the retirees who's young again, Daniel, the husband of Deborah, he steps out of the fray and says, I'm an American lawyer. I'll handle this.
Yeah.
And then is immediately slapped and then stabbed to death.
Yeah. Yes. They all are essentially very quickly the conquistadors kind of take everyone hostage. And there's a little note that's made here, and I don't know if it's even needed. Maybe it's going to be more important later on. But Matt, who had been knocked out previously, had like a cut on his face, and someone's like, "Hey, your cut's gone." And he's like, "Oh, things heal faster here." Well,
that's a bit that has come up here is what we kind of learn in scenes around. There's just a lot of scenes happening that don't connect, but with Matt, this guy who keeps calling himself an American lawyer when he tries to stand up to the conquistadors, he's stabbed to death. But what we've already learned from a different scene is that on Riverworld, you don't just come back once. You apparently come back an undetermined amount of times. It's like a video game. You have many lives, and it'll become a problem throughout this thing is there's no threat of death, really. Like, they stab Matt to death, and, like, he's not, like, he's dead. His wife's upset, obviously. It's sad that he's been killed. But, like, we, the viewer, are just like, all right, well, he'll be back. It's fine. And this becomes this running thing. Is like, these characters are going to be threatened with death perpetually. Some of them will die. But there's no stakes to it. But they treat it as if it's permanent. Every time someone dies, it's like, can you believe they were killed? It's like, it doesn't matter. Remember how everyone comes back?
Well, I think even adding to that, I think what also makes it even less important is that it's not as if everyone is going to age. Everyone is young. So it's not like you're going to die and we don't know how long it's going to take for you to resurrect, and you're going to come back and the person that you're with has, aged tremendously, and now there's a challenge in your relationship. It's just like, hey, you'll come back in a couple minutes, I guess, or a couple days. Everything's fine. You'll be young and beautiful and unharmed.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially it. So it's an odd piece. This sort of comes into play, as you've said, as they get to the conquistador camp as hostages or slaves, and they finally meet the other guest from the tour group that we had seen at the beginning, a man named Francisco.
Finally.
And this is Hal's husband. Hal we've also met. They found him on the beach. And he reveals to them that he's actually been on Riverworld for 18 months, and I guess he's become a conquistador to survive in Riverworld. So the implication being that they've come to life all together, but he popped up 18 months earlier, and they're like, what do you know about Riverworld? He's like, nothing. I have no further information for you.
His name's Antonio, though, isn't it?
Oh, is it Antonio? Sorry, my apologies.
Antonio, yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah.
But yes, he's kind of there just to let them know. It's like there's a time thing. If Jesse's alive, she may have been here for a lot longer than them, etc., etc. What they come to find out is this Parizo, he's been setting up a trap along the river, and that's what they're going to be put to work on as his slaves. He wants to catch a steamship that's going to pass on the river soon. He's setting this ambush. This was also baffling. I mean, I guess it's because they've been taken captive, but Matt's like, we have to ruin Parizo's plans. Everybody works slow and like subtly sabotage his ambush. And I'm just like, why though? Like, you're just going to get in trouble, and you have no stake in either side of this right now. Like, I just didn't understand why Matt was so like insistent.
Well, I thought of a different plan. They've already learned that you can die and be resurrected. You're now in essentially like a prisoner of war camp. Kill yourself, and you're going to wake up out of the camp. I mean, there's a much easier way out of this. I don't know why no one did that.
Well, they have a scene where a guy says he's killed himself a bunch of times, and it kind of sucks. So they sort of say that's their way of being like, well, you could do that, but it's an inconvenience.
Yeah, I mean, so is being shackled to a wall and having to, for some reason, shadow box while you're waiting.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. Parizo wants to meet with Matt because Parizo himself is also one of the Unbound. He doesn't have his own Grail band, and I guess Parizo's kind of working for the Salvationists who want to destroy Riverworld, except that Parizo also states his goal as being to conquer and rule Riverworld, which seems counterintuitive to what the side he's working for, but whatever. And he's like, hey, Matt, nice to meet you. I've met a lot of Americans on Riverworld, and they are all, quote, so noble in their hearts, end quote.
Yeah.
Such a post 9/11, post Iraq War show. The show.
Yeah.
At any rate, Parizo can't have Matt kicking around without his band on, because that means he's one of the champions. Even if Matt hasn't picked a side yet, he can't risk it. So as you said, Matt gets shackled to a wall. We're honestly, for 10 straight minutes, we have a montage where he is shadow boxing in shackles. Like, it goes on forever.
Yeah, it's just, and I guess it's like he's a tough guy, but I'm like, he's a reporter. Why did they have to make him like this action hero? I'm like, wouldn't it be more interesting if he found something inside of him to become the leader he wasn't before in life, because he was just someone who watched news happens as opposed to intervened and progressed things? It's a more interesting character arc and development.
No, they need to have him right all the time. He's self-righteous and always correct. He's the most unlikable character.
Yeah, and it's just like, and also, there's two seats where he's brought in front of Pizarro, by the way, I think is how it's pronounced. He's brought in front of him, and like twice, and I was like, and it just felt like at this point, it's already starting to stall. I think we're like 45 minutes into the show at this point, and I'm like, oh, they already don't know what to do with these characters that they've chosen to put in shackles?
Yeah, no, they need to put him in shackles one time. Pizarro puts him in shackles in one time so he can shadow box, and then also meet his old cameraman Simon, who's shackled next to him, but he doesn't notice for quite some time.
Oh, and this is the wild. Is this where we find out about the world?
This is the best. He's like,
it's wild.
Simon, what are you doing here? He's like, oh, I died 6 years after you in 2016. You know, when that UFO vaporized Earth.
I loved it. This was the best part. It's like, it of all the things to choose, maybe this was in the book. It's such a weird thing to just leave and dangle. He's just like, yeah, that just happened. Anyways, you really missed it.
Yeah, it was baffling. So he needs to be put in shackles so he can meet his old cameraman so they can team back up and learn that the Earth was vaporized by a UFO. And then, as you said, he just gets sent back to, what's his name, Pizarro?
Pizarro, yeah.
He gets sent back to Pizarro so that Pizarro can now put him in a different cage. He's like, I'm putting you in a smaller cage. And he's put in that smaller cage for another extended period of time of a montage. And at some point, a conquistador, the very large Jersey conquistador you mentioned earlier.
That's right.
He overhears Matt talking to one of the invisible caretakers, and he hears Matt saying the name Sam because the caretaker's like, go find Sam when you get out of this cage. So the conquistador's like, hey, why are you saying the name Sam? And he kind of takes him out of the cage to rough him up a bit, at which point the suicide bomber jumps out of nowhere to stab the conquistador in the face and set Matt free as a way of like atoning for blowing up the nightclub, I guess.
And then she's like, I think she's killed, isn't she? But it's like she's
dead. I'm like, who cares? She'll be back. It's fine.
Yeah.
Matt, of course, flees from the conquistadors. They're in hot pursuit with Richard Burton on a horse chasing after him, when a group of people dressed like French Canadian voyeurs pop out with muskets and drive them off and rescue Matt.
Yeah, and who were they supposed to be? They're a historical group of people. I didn't catch it.
I couldn't tell you. I'm just like, these look like things from a textbook I read when I was 8.
The important point is they're driven off, and just when things were going bad, and they take him via canoe to this boat that we're going to see on the side of the boat. Yeah, the riverboat, finally, and it's called the Not for Hire. And we're going to meet two characters.
Well, we finally meet Sam, who he's supposed to find.
Yeah, and would you believe it? If you had seen the 2003 version, it's the only recurring character. It's Samuel Clemens, Mark Twain. And then I like that he's...
Wait, hold on. Before you
Yeah.
move on. It's Mark Twain, but this has to be the beefiest portrayal of Mark Twain I have ever seen. He's so beefy. There's never been a beefy Mark Twain I've seen.
I'm going to also say, I don't know this actor. He might be great, but he is doing... I'm not from Missouri or the I think that's where Mark Twain was from, or the South. It is one of the worst, I'll say, Missouri accents I've ever heard. It's like watching if you were a kid and they're like, do a Southern accent. You're like, well, it's terrible. Every scene he's in, I'm like, please guys, stop this.
I just wanted to see Mark Twain in his natural habitat of a UFC ring.
He is very handsome and muscular, and I think it's the reason they chose it is because he's just constantly wanting to have sex with the other woman on the boat. And her name is I got her whole name, which is Allegra Bracciaforte de Venezia.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to do much with her other than
No.
They're like,
She's sexy. That's her point.
She's a prostitute from the old times. I'm like, okay, and that's her only character trait.
Yeah. And she'll like have sex with Mark Twain at one point, and he's just like, oh, I can't believe how good you are at having sex with me. It's terrible. It's terrible. By the way, that's how good he sounds.
Anyway, Mark Twain is another of the unbound champions for the Second Chancer. So he's theoretically on the team that Matt's been freed by, and. He, at some point, had tricked Pizarro into building this steamship, and then he stole the ship from Pizarro and stole Pizarro's girl, so Pizarro doesn't like him very much.
Yeah, well, it's not enough to steal someone's boat. That's one thing. But if you steal the girl, too, that's maybe you say a riverboat too far. That's
a
terrible.
riverboat too far. It's nice to know that in 2010 on Riverworld, our sexual politics have followed us there.
Yeah.
At any rate, the caretakers have given Mark Twain's riverboat a fusion reactor to power it via river water or whatever. So he's got a very fancy piece of alien technology. And Mark Twain's basically, his whole thing is he's traveling upriver, hoping to find the source of Riverworld, like the source of all these rivers, and maybe he'll find the creator of Riverworld when he gets there. That's what Mark Twain's up to.
But I was like, does that make sense? Did that make sense at all? Like, it's like this world he's noticed, it's a series of rivers. Okay, great. He noticed that. And we are going to get a pull-out shot at some point that's going to actually show the planet. You do actually see that it's a series of connecting rivers that sort of look like veins. And I think there's like two, like maybe moons that are floating outside to let you know it's not Earth. But he's looking for the center or whatever it is. But I don't understand why he thinks that's going to show him anything. It's like, I'm going to walk to the equator and then I'm going to find God there. It's like, why? Why would you think that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a motivation. He's like, I'm going to find the source of the river, and maybe that'll be how I find the craters of Riverworld.
Yeah, but it's like, but what if the world is just rivers flowing into rivers? There is no major basin of water.
I want to float a bigger question I had logistically about this.
Okay.
So Mark Twain has said, my thing is I'm traveling upriver on my riverboat to get to the source of the river. At some point in the past, I stole this boat from Pizarro. How has Pizarro, on foot, on land, somehow gotten so far ahead of Mark Twain, who's been only traveling upriver away from him, in order to be able to build a fort and establish this ambush? I just, like, logistically, it seems like Mark Twain would be uncatchable for him.
I would assume that every time there's, like, another river, he's like, another right. He just keeps like taking different turns. So he's just like
so you think
going
he's going right? He's just circling. He's just doing a circle. Doesn't matter. It just something that entered my mind when I was thinking about it.
Luke, the more importantly, he's got like a whole like gambling room on the boat.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about them. I don't have time or patience. He's got a whole other set of characters on this. There's like a lady and a dude and a whole crew with him. So just a whole new set of characters who get names, who get backstories that I will deal with maybe if they come back up in part 2. I can't deal with them today. There's too many characters.
I do like when he's talking to the one character who reveals that he's a Muslim, and he's like, why are you wearing that hat? And it's just like, just this classic bat. He's just walking. He's like, why are you wearing that hat? He's like, well, I'm Muslim as part of my faith. He's like, that's weird. Anyway, America. I'm like, oh, jeez, man.
I know. The plot mechanics that we need to know is that Matt is able to inform Mark Twain of the upcoming ambush. So Mark Twain's like, let's take a back river that skirts around the back of the camp so we miss the ambush.
Yeah.
And as they are passing by the back of the camp, a lot of stuff has been happening at camp with our many other characters. All the retiree tour group and Tomo have had their own like weird side plot that is mostly has boiled down to Deborah, one of the tour group members, has attempted an assassination on Pizarro in retribution for killing her husband. She's failed.
Who's not
so
dead.
Pizarro's about to burn her at the stake.
Yeah, and this is a weird thing. Like, I get they're trying to show that he's evil, but like, I don't know my conquistador Spanish rule of Peru or wherever it is that he sort of conquered. Were they burning people at the stake?
I don't know. It seemed like a lot of work for her assassination attempt was pretty half-hearted. Like, just stab her where she stands. I don't know why you have to go to this trouble.
Yeah.
But this allows Tomo, who has in the meantime been building herself a set of medieval Japanese armor and swords to, I guess I want to say leading a rebellion, but she doesn't seem to have told anyone her plan. She just has come out with a bunch of swords, and she's fighting conquistadors. Everyone's jumping in. All our heroes that we've met, tour group people, cameramen, they're joining in. They're fighting back. Matt is coming by on a boat. He sees it, and he just jumps off the boat and runs over and joins
With
in.
an axe. With an axe, though.
Oh, well, yeah, he grabs an axe. He's a war reporter, Jordan. He knows how to war.
Yeah, he comes in with an axe. I do like that when Tomo's fighting people with her swords, she seems to only fight conquistador ninjas, I've noticed.
I mean, fight what you know. There's a long battle sequence.
Yeah.
But you'll never guess. Matt and his team wins. Mark Twain kills Bizarro. And then they take a brief moment to discover that the horses on Riverworld are robots.
Yeah, and before we get into the robots, I have a weird question for you. So we've learned you die on Riverworld, you will be resurrected on Riverworld. We don't know how long it takes. They kind of imply it doesn't take that long, maybe hours or days, but they don't explain, and maybe they will in the next part. What happens if there's just a dead body there? Because we've just had this big battle. There's all these people. You literally see in the background, people are being like staked and they're sticking out of the ground. I'm like, these people are feasibly going to come back. Are they going to come back and see their dead body?
Good question. I'm going to go with yes. I think yes is the answer.
And maybe yes, because maybe they're all robots, because the horse is a robot, or maybe the world is robots.
No. The people definitely aren't robots because they bleed and they have all this like internal organs and they can die. It is just the reveal this one horse they knocked over and like its belly's cut open and it just has gears inside of it. And I don't know what that implication is, that just like only the humans on Riverworld are real and everything else is a robot maybe? I'm not sure. They just reveal it's like horses are robots here. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know. And then they leave it because we cut to Matt looking out at the water kind of like forlornly, and he's just like, water. And then Blue Woman comes out and she's like, hey, you didn't kill Burton. That was like the one thing you were supposed to do. And he's like, yeah, but I don't really kill people. And then she goes on about like second chances again, and he's like, but I like Jessica. And she's like, you can't see Jessica. He's like, but I like Jessica. And then I was like, no one cares, man.
Yeah, this is the moment. I mean, we've already covered this. She just explains a lot of the lore of Riverworld. We've already covered it. We can move on. But yeah, he gets a moment to whatever. He's brooding. He's brooding by the river.
But I also don't understand. Like, is it supposed to be that he stands up for himself and chooses his own path? Is that what we as a viewer are supposed to understand?
No, he just hasn't picked still. It's just like he will continue to have not picked a side.
Right.
At any rate, they head back to the steamship to leave, only to find that Richard Burton, who'd run away from the battle, has commandeered it.
It is funny that it's Richard Burton.
Richard Burton then finally reveals which Richard Burton he is, not the actor like I thought the entire time. He shoots and kills Matt, so Matt's dead now. I'm like, okay, who cares? He'll be back next episode. I don't really.
Yeah,
it doesn't bother
but
me.
you're right. They treat it with great aplomb. It's like slow mo. It's like it might as well have like Sarah McLachlan playing in the background or something that he dies. I'm like, guys, we know he'll be fine. He guaranteed.
Yeah,
he'll be back.
I'm not worried.
Yeah.
He's being shot. It's okay. And then Richard Burton, he sets off. He steals the old steamship. Although what we see is a bunch of Mark Twain's crew is stowed away. So I wonder if they'll come back to do anything. Whatever, doesn't matter. And the big thing is that now that Richard Burton, who's working for the Salvationists, who wants to destroy Riverworld, he has this steamship with a fusion reactor on it. So I guess we're supposed to think, oh, is he going to blow up Riverworld with this fusion reactor, I guess?
I thought he was just like, oh, he's going to be able to travel upstream now.
Yeah, I think the implication is he'll get to the source and then explode it, maybe.
And then we get to see Alan Cumming standing on a mountain for some reason.
Yeah, and that's it. It ends, and the camera pulls back to Alan Cumming, who's a member of the Blue Man Group. He's one of these caretakers painted blue, and he's standing on a mountain watching things happen. We didn't talk about it earlier. He appears for 30 seconds earlier, like right at the start, where he's just like, hey, it's me. I'm working with Richard Burton, and I am a Salvationist. And I'm like, okay, Alan Cumming. And then he just is gone for the rest of the 2 hours until he's standing on this mountain.
They only had him for one day, that's why.
And then, as you've said at the end, the camera pulls out, and what we see is Riverworld from like a satellite view of the entire planet, and we just see all the rivers spreading across. It's a nice view of Riverworld. It's nice to kind of see the geography of the place. But that's kind of the conclusion of part one.
And it's weird now that we've finished it. We've stopped talking about it. It's weird as a beginning because it doesn't really end on a cliffhanger. I mean, I guess it does because Matt's dead, but we know he's back, so it's not really a cliffhanger. But then this didn't really set that much up, I didn't think. I guess it does, but not in a way that makes you as a viewer go oh, I wonder what's going to happen. I could have been fine to not watch the second part. We don't have to watch it. It's oh, I guess things happened.
The big cliffhangers are, will he find Jesse, and will they get the riverboat back? That's kind of what you're left with. That's basically all you're coming back for part two.
Right, but I don't think they have established interesting characters. I don't think I care if he finds Jesse. I don't really care about his atonement. I don't care if they find the riverboat. No, do I care if Mark Twain finds the center of the rivers. And I don't care about any of this because it was a weird, perfunctory introduction of characters, also of the world, and it wasn't even they didn't even give me one character. Even give me a bad funny novelty character of some sort. It was nothing. They were all just bleh.
I mean, I thought what was weird was that my understanding is this is a mini series. This is going to be 2 parts, and I maybe their plan is to come back and do more mini series in this world. I know that's a thing sci-fi's done in the past. But it really feels like a pilot because it introduces so many characters.
I agree.
Have nothing to do, and it's a huge fault that none of them are interesting, obviously, but it's just do I need this many characters for 2 TV movies? It's too, there's too many people. It's like they're setting up a much longer series, and it's just I don't understand. Why are there so many characters? They're unnecessary. Focus.
You mentioned an interesting thing that this time period, sort of the lost era of TV, specifically, not lost era, the TV show era, and I'll give it to that show. It was a very specific show, whatever your feelings may have been on it or the implications of that show, was that they introduced a bunch of characters, and their whole thing was we're going to slowly, over a season, maybe 2, 3 seasons, introduce these characters, why they're interesting, why they act the way they are, and that was kind of that feel of that show. And they've done the same sort of thing in this, but have not given any time to actually make you care about the characters, nor do I think it necessarily would work. I don't need to see Deborah's whole life story, but nor do I actually care that Deborah's there because I didn't learn anything about her, didn't care about her, nor is she important to the plot. So thus, Deborah shouldn't even be in this show. It's a weird time waster of all these characters that the writers don't care about, so just don't have them in it. It's really, really peculiar how it's structured.
It's very funny. I would say that the 2003 does so much better a job at what the 2010 is trying to do. Is the mystery was more interesting. It felt more like a lost kind of why are they here thing. And the smart thing that the 2003 did is it didn't do this long setup on Earth before they he dies right away. And then you meet him, you learn who he is, and then he meets a cast of characters he's going to team up with. Whereas this is just we're going to introduce you to the cast of characters you're going to team up with on Earth, and then it's going to be inexplicable. When you get to Riverworld, the whole thing of Riverworld is you could meet anybody, but they have been no, you're going to hang out with this elderly tour group. That's what we want you to hang out with. But it just doesn't it doesn't make sense in the world they've set up. There's just no reason you would bump into these people and spend all this time with them again. But they're so committed to this, these people they introduced in the first 5 minutes to be No, these are the core crew.
Well,
Just like,
it all has
but
to be
why?
connected to Matt and Jesse. That's why. It's the only people that know them as a couple, I suppose. But it's like...
But they
who
met them arguably 24
know.
hours ago.
I know. I don't disagree with you. It's just, it's weird that that's... But again, even if you didn't have those characters, I don't care if he finds Jesse or not. She's so boring. He's so boring. Who cares?
It's a very odd choices were made in the writing of this. And I don't know, maybe it got rewritten so many times. This is what it ended up being. It's all comes down like to the writing. Like theoretically, it's not the best looking show, but it doesn't look any worse than anything else from 2010
Agreed.
TV. Like it's fine. Like the production value's there. It looks like Vancouver, whatever. Shows it's shot in Vancouver look like the first one looked like it was in Vancouver. Doesn't matter. It's just like the writing is inexplicable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a good lead to us rating this thing. What do you want to give this show?
I'm not sure. I'm a little torn on it.
Well, it's a little unfair because, again, for all intents and purposes, we're watching the first half of a 3-hour show or miniseries. So I kind of feel the same way. I almost want to say, like, I'll give a score, but I reserve the right to adjust it once we see the second half.
I guess so. I mean, I'm fine rating this as a standalone. But, like, if I watch this first part of the TV movie and you're like, come back in 30 minutes and we're putting the second half on, this would decide that for me. Talking about it through, it makes it worse. Like, the more I talk about it, the more I realize
agree.
how bad it is. I'm realizing it's coming from a real era of TV that, like, and one of those things that's rare for us, it's like, yes, I lived through the 90s TV, but like that's like more nostalgia. Like I was a child who didn't understand the world at the time, so like I didn't really have a good view of it. Whereas this is just like, I was a grown person in 2010, and I just like watching the tropes of what TV, what 24 did to TV, what like those kind of shows like baked into programs. Watching them is so awful to watch. They're such bad tropes that it makes it even harder to watch. What's already a tough show to watch. I don't know. I'm gonna give it a 2.
I'm not gonna go too much higher. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. I don't know. It's just it's not like, I don't know. It's not that offensive. It's not that boring. It's not that bad looking. But it's bad enough that like you wouldn't care if you saw the second half, which, by the way, is a great lead for our next podcast where we talk about the second half. But it's a real curious thing that is here, because I get what it feels like is there was an idea and they're like, we'll improve on an idea, which is the books, but they don't seem to make any effort to do that. What they find interesting is something other than what I actually think is interesting, which is this weird concept of waking up in this type of purgatory world where historical figures are all over the place and you can't die and you don't know who's pulling the strings or why you're here. That's just interesting. There's a million ways to do it. But then they were just like, what if we rewrite this guy as like your classic kind of no nonsense guy, and he needs to find his hot girl and they're going to be hot together. It's like, oh, this is so dumb. That's not interesting at all.
I mean, it fits all those tropes we've seen of these kind of heroes before. Like, he's no different than most of them. Maybe a little blander than some, but not that much different.
Yeah, I'd agree. We've watched enough of these things that you're like, oh, I've seen this character before in some form.
Well, let's wrap it up, Jordan, because we got more to talk about when we watch part 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the meantime, we, as always, have bonus episodes for charity. This is for older shows that we've taken the escape pod from, which we can't from Riverworld, unfortunately. But some shows we just can't take any more of. The ratings fall too low and we take an escape pod. Or there's some shows where we've been watching multi-season shows where we're just doing the best of. So we're just watching the top 3 episodes of each season, so we're missing a whole bunch of episodes. So what we've done is we've established this where if you make a donation to a charity as chosen by our past guests, we've got a list of them on our website. We'll go back and we'll watch an episode of your choosing that we might have skipped from a previous show we've watched. And you can get all the details on our website. You can find that at continuumdrag.podbean.com. Or on social media, we have links to that in our bio, so you can go find that there. But that's just a way for you to get a bonus episode of a show we've previously watched but missed some episodes of. You pick the episode, we go back, we watch it, and you get a bonus episode. That's the gist of it anyway. And then, of course, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, we're going to have clips from Riverworld. You'll see what a blue person looks like. You'll see a lightning orb. You'll see some of the sci-fi stuff in this.
Maybe that guy getting stabbed in the eye?
Maybe. You'll definitely see a suicide bombing, that's for sure.
Thank goodness.
Honestly, I think you'll probably see that 10-year-old girl get run over too.
He's like, oh yeah, that really was hard to buff out of my bumper.
Yeah, I felt really bad about that for about 45 seconds.
And she's like, don't feel bad about it. She wasn't American.
Think about all the good things you've done. Like, meet me and my tour guide group.
Yeah.
The handle on those social medias are @ContinuumDrag. It's real easy to find. And if you could spell Continuum Drag, it's easy to find anyway. And if you have anything you want to talk to us about, maybe you have questions about bonus episodes for charity, maybe you want to let us know how Riverworld should be, what the better version of it is. Maybe like they've made it in, I don't know, some other countries made a better version of it. Let us know. We'll watch that instead. You can get us at continuumdrag@gmail.com, the email here. But that about wraps it up for this week. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, happy birthday.
Thank you. It's more like crap world, am I right?
They're going to be like more like crappy birthday.
Yeah, more like crappy birthday. Oh, that's funny. Oh, I should have said that.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.